Welcome, everyone, to this program called From Surviving to Thriving, Revolutionary Breakthroughs That Will Shape Your Future. I'm Steve Farrell, co-founder of Humanities Team, and I'm here with Gregg Braden. Welcome, Gregg.
Steve, it's so good to see you. I'm excited to be with you and with our community today. This is an unscripted program, and we never know exactly where it's going to go. So I'm just going to follow your lead here.
All right. Well, we always have a lot of fun, and boy, we're getting to so much that's really important in today's world, too.
Uh,
So Humanities Team has been working with Gregg on an acclaimed 8-week masterclass. For those who want to go deeper with us, we'll tell you more about it a little later. So be sure to stay to the end. But for now, let's focus on all the exciting things that we're going to be diving into with Gregg. I'm going to introduce my special guest now. Gregg Braden is a 5-time New York Times bestselling author, scientist, international educator, and pioneer in the emerging paradigm bridging science, social policy, and human potential. His research resulted in the 2003 discovery of intelligent information encoded in the human genome and the 2010 application of fractal time to predict future occurrences of past events. Gregg's work has led to 15 film credits, 12 award-winning books, now published in over 40 languages, and he was a 2020 nominee for the prestigious Templeton Prize. He has presented his discoveries in over 34 countries on 6 continents, and has been invited to speak to the United Nations, Fortune 500 companies, and the U.S. military. And once again, it's great to have you with us, Gregg.
Oh, Steve, thank you so much. I've got a big smile on my face. I feel like my life just flashed before my eyes. Listening to the bio, my mind went to what was happening in my life for each of those milestones that you just identified. And it's been quite a journey, and it's a journey that has touched many facets of our world and of our lives today, but all toward the same goal, Steve. The world's changing. We all know that. It's no secret. And the questions that people ask me, number one, what's happening? Number two, what can we do to make life better for ourselves and for our families? And how do we thrive in these changes? Not just survive, not just get by, but how can we really make the best of the changes that are coming down to us in our world? So as I hear you read that bio, my mind is going to all the research projects and the travels and the journeys and the amazing people that I've met along the way to help me accomplish my dream and my passion to be able to share the really good news that is coming with this change. And I think we got to call this, Steve, we got to call it the Good News Program, because that's exactly what it is.
Yes, it is. It is. This is the Good News Program. And you framed that nicely in the midst of so much turbulence and challenge. In fact, let me just frame my first question to you this way, Gregg. We're obviously living in a very challenging time right now, and lots of people out there are actually struggling to keep up with rapid changes that are happening all around us almost every day. So can you talk a little about some of the changes that are coming soon that many people may not even know about yet, that will affect every aspect of our lives and change the way we live on the planet?
Sure, Steve. Well, I'm just going to begin with change itself. We are the product of a number of generations and a philosophy, a way of thinking that doesn't like change. We have been conditioned to believe that we live in a world that's static, that once we find something that works, that we create this perfect balance and everything stays just the way it is. And the truth is, anything but the truth is what we're living in, because we live in a world of constant change. Nature actually abhors balance. And a lot of people are surprised when they hear me say that. But if you think about balance and perfect balance, if you think of scales that are perfectly balanced or an ecosystem that is perfectly balanced, if it's perfectly balanced, absolutely nothing is happening. It cannot happen because there is no impetus to achieve balance. The balance prevents the change. What we're seeking, Steve, is not balance, it's harmony. We're looking for harmony. This is harmony versus balance. We're looking for harmony in our lives with the changes, harmony in the choices that we make in balancing work and personal lives and finances. It's all about harmony. So I'm just going to begin by saying the world is always in harmony, but it may not look like what we have been conditioned to expect, because we're expecting a static world, and we live in a dynamic world, a dynamic system. So the change is natural. The change is healthy. The question is, how do we respond to that change? And that's really what this program is all about. I said it was a good news program. And I think for me, Steve, one of the most beautiful pieces of news is that we already have all the solutions to all the problems that face us in the world today. The technological solutions already exist. I was at an event, a live event, live audience, right before COVID, before the lockdowns. And someone asked me, they said, Greg, based on what you know as a scientist and the research that you've done and the industries that you worked on, the industries you worked in as a problem solver during times of crisis, why don't you orchestrate a meeting? They said, why don't you get all the political leaders and the government leaders and the scientists and the engineers together in a room and figure these problems out? And my answer surprised them, because that already happened, and it happened almost 40 years ago. So we have the technological solutions to energy, to food, to the climate issues that we're concerned about. We have the technological issues to the global financial system that is buckling and collapsing as we speak, causing so much hardship in people's lives right now. We have those solutions, Steve. What we're lacking is the vision and the leadership that makes it a priority, that makes people a priority, and it makes it a priority to bring those solutions to the world today. And I'll give you a perfect example. The United Nations is very clear. We've got all the food. We have more than enough food to feed every mouth of every child, every woman, every man on the face of the earth today. It's not a food shortage. It is the prioritization of how that food moves from point A to point B and what populations are considered a priority. And when I talk about leadership, Steve, I'm not talking about a nation, for example. It's not about American leadership or European or African or anything like that. It's the kind of we are leaders. We are the leaders. And in our lives, there are choices that we can make, political choices, personal choices, choices of finance, to support programs, organizations, policies, and laws that help us to achieve the goals for the harmony in the world, and the food is just one of those examples. So the same thing applies with energy, the same thing applies with, and we'll talk about these in this program, same thing applies with the global financial system. To me, I was excited when I learned that so many solutions have already been discovered. And I was also disappointed, Steve, I have to be honest, because what it said to me, if we have these solutions, when I say this to a live audience, I love doing this. I stand in front of a live audience on the stage, and then I can look them in the eyes and I can say, we already have the solutions to all the big problems in the world today. And the question that everyone asks, and I can hear it before I can hear it in their minds before they even speak it with their mouths, is if we have those solutions, where are they? How come we don't know about them? And I even have I have scientists and engineers in my audiences often, medical professionals often, because we're also talking about healthcare. We have solutions to the health crises that we are facing as a civilization today, to many of the conditions that we're living today that we did not see in populations 200 years ago, 300 years ago. We have the solutions to those things. And what the medical professionals will say to me is, how come we don't know about these things? When I talk about the human heart, for example, we've been conditioned to believe that the heart is simply a pump to pump blood through the veins of our bodies. And of course, we know it does that, and it does that really well. But we can build a machine to do that. We can build an artificial pump. What the new discoveries are showing is that pumping blood may be the least of what our heart does, because it is also communicating information to the brain that is instructing the rest of the body in terms of how to function. Those instructions originate in the heart through the neurons in the heart. The heart is producing hormones in our bodies in ways that we didn't know until relatively recently, the early 1990s. 1991, 40,000 specialized cells were discovered in the heart, a neural network that we regulate through the way we feel about our relationship to ourselves and the world. So think about what this means. This is telling us that our sense of well-being and our sense of hope are vital, Steve, as we respond to these changes, because the way we feel about the possibilities of the world out there are directly influencing the way that our bodies respond in here. And that's why this program, I think, is so important, because we're going to outline big solutions that are made by our vote, but also localized solutions that we can choose every day in our own lives with our families and our communities. So long answer to a short question, but I just kind of wanted to lay that out as we go into this program today.
Yeah, nice. Well, there's a lot of complexity or a lot of things to speak to here, and you got to a lot of them. So thank you. What are some of the things we can do as individuals to prepare ourselves and our families to be able to not only handle this change that you're talking about, but to thrive and feel secure in the new world that we're creating?
You know, Steve, the changes are only a problem if we are not ready for the changes. You think about that. The changes are only a problem if we are not prepared to embrace the changes in a healthy way. I'm just going to let me give you a big, broad example. I'm a scientist. I mentioned that. I'm a degreed geologist with a strong background in life sciences, math, physics, computer sciences. And I say that because it's that diverse background in the sciences that allows me to stay current with so many of the new discoveries that are, I mean, they're happening on a weekly basis. The tech journals that used to be published every 30 days now supplement the journal Science, for example, peer-reviewed scientific journal. It supplements the monthly publication with a weekly newsletter because there's so many discoveries happening so quickly. So my diverse background gives me the opportunity to stay current with all of those discoveries. So on the big picture, let me just talk about climate change as an example of this. The scientific community knows that climate is dynamic. It's always changing. And that humans can contribute to that, but if there were no humans on the Earth, the geologic record shows us climate change was still happening before humans arrived and has continued. So here's an example of where we could prepare for climate change by doing things like hardening our power grid, burying power cables under the ground, knowing that we're in a time of volatile weather. In the Northeast, in the United States, for example, New England states, they get those ice storms that burden the power lines, they break the power lines, the windstorms that knock the power lines and the telephone poles down every year. It's not a surprise that it's happening, and it is happening with greater intensity. Just think, if we were to harden those power grids, if we buried those underground, the weather is still going to happen, but people are still going to have lights, they're still going to have heat, they're still going to be able to cook their meals. We wouldn't be cutting down vital forests to create the telephone poles that are breaking every year. We'd have people, working. A lot of jobs would be created. And that's just one example of the kind of thinking, that little shift in thinking. Well, that same principle applies to us on a personal level, on a family level, on a community level, and on a social level. It makes sense, Steve, to recognize that we're in a time of extremes. This is not business as usual. It's not the world that we have been conditioned to experience in the last 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years. So it makes sense to expect the unexpected. It makes sense to expect disruptions in supply chains, disruptions in power, disruptions in financial systems. So when we begin to think that way, I've caught some heat from this, Steve, because people say, well, it's, Greg, you're creating fear. The fear comes from the unknown, and the fear comes from the sense that we have hinged our well-being on the external world. This is what we've been conditioned to do. We live in a society where we place our sense of well-being on the world out there.